morning. Thank you everyone for tuning into the International Alliance of Academies of Childhood Disabilities World CP Day 24-hour Global Listening and Sharing session. I'm Rhoda Kwan from 5.1 Moral Charities, and today we are honored to have the team from Singapore present how COVID-19 has prompted change in the delivery of services in the early intervention and special education settings, in line with this year's theme, Build Back Better. Begin the session proper, here are some ground rules for the next hour. This session will be recorded, and if you do not wish to be recorded, you may turn off your video and not participate in the discussion or chat function. As the session is a mix of pre-recorded videos and panel discussions, please feel free to type any questions you may have throughout the session in the chat function at the bottom of the window. Please address the questions publicly and not just to the host. Also, as much as possible, please do not ask questions anonymously so that the team can address your questions even after the session should we run out of time to do so. During the you may use, that has been removed, my apologies. And as we wish to create a safe space for everyone, please be reminded that everyone's experiences and perspectives are important, even if they may differ from our own. Thus, we ask that everyone have the right to speak without being interrupted. If at any point in the session you feel uncomfortable, please send the moderator a private message if you do not wish to communicate your concerns to the wider group. Let me now introduce the team from Singapore. This year, we have teams from the Team Early Intervention for Children and Rainbow Center. KEIC provides early intervention for children with developmental needs below 7 years of age. They empower young children with developmental needs to reach their full potential by creating holistic and nurturing environments with plenty of natural learning opportunities to meaningfully engage children through everyday routines and activities. Rainbow Center is a social service organization operating 3 special education schools: Margaret Drive School, Yishun Park School, and Admiral Hill School, for infants, children, and youth with special needs like autism, intellectual disability, developmental delay, and multiple disabilities. They create opportunities for persons with disabilities to make the most of their abilities and participate meaningfully. We will first have the team from KEIC to take the floor. We have here with us today a senior physiotherapist, Siti Jiraya. Siti has been a pediatric physiotherapist for up to 12 years. We also have a colleague, Marissa Halina, here with us today. Marissa will be celebrating her 10th year in the field in a couple of months. They will now be sharing with us their experience adapting their service provision to meet the needs of their clients during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Good morning to everyone. I am Siti, a physiotherapist from the early intervention sector. And next to me is my colleague Marissa, who is an early interventionist.
We are honored to represent our organization, 5.1, in Singapore in today's IAAC Listen and Sharing session.
Marissa, would you like to begin by walking us through the journey of a child with developmental needs in Singapore's context?
Sure. In Singapore, children with developmental support needs are identified through medical or routine developmental screening or feedback from preschool teachers. The child will then be referred to the child developmental units, the hospitals, where they will be closely monitored. The referral will then proceed to an agency called SG Enable. The SG Enable, the team then works closely with families to ensure that there is a proper handover of care services to the next channel, which is the Early Intervention Center for Infants and Children, or most commonly known as the EPIC Center. So generally, a child's journey begins in the EPIC for up to 6 years of age, by which a school readiness assessment will be done to determine the child's placement in a SPED or mainstream school. The second part of the presentation, as mentioned, will be done by Rainbow Center, who is one of the SPED schools in Singapore.
Yes, please share with our viewers here today some of the programs that are available in the EPIC centers.
So EPIC support ranges from in preschool support to EPIC at center support based on the varying needs of the children assessed by the early interventionist. There are 2 types of services available in EPIC centers. First being the in-preschool programs like the learning support, developmental support, or developmental support plus. In these programs, the EI team collaborates with the preschool teachers to ensure that the children's developmental needs are properly assessed and supported in the preschool setting itself. The second type of service available would be the actual programs conducted in the EPIC centers itself.
That's right. With all of these programs in place, even when COVID-19 pandemic hit, the EPIC centers and the schools were able to continue supporting the families of children with developmental needs. In Singapore, different ministries and government agencies make up the Multi-Ministry Task Force, or MTF, for the pandemic. They direct and coordinate the nation's responses to the COVID-19 outbreak. Based on the directives by the MTF, school and organizations will receive guidelines through the circulars issued by their respective governing agencies. This means that the EPIC centers receive circulars from Iaacd, while the SPEC school receive them from MOE.
Yes, that's right, Siti. There were three main phases in Singapore's COVID-19 response. When the majority of the world was on lockdown, Singapore followed a similar response, which we termed as the circuit breaker. After which we had the hybrid arrangement, where we had some students coming back to the center to continue center-based intervention, while other students did home-based learning. Our SPEC partners have shared that on their side, the class as a whole alternate between home-based learning week and in-school learning week. Following a more resilient community response, we were able to transit back to school with strict guidelines being put in place to ensure everyone's safety.
That's a summary of the COVID responses in Singapore. Now, Marisa, there were so many changes and restrictions that many of us went through. What do you think were the key pillars that ensured the continuity and flow of the program and services in EPIC during those times?
I think the ECHO framework was the anchor by which not only the continuity and the flow, but also the quality of our program were able to be properly maintained. It is a robust framework that focuses on the entire families instead of just the individual child himself. So during the pandemic, the framework remained the same, but adaptations were made on how our services were actually delivered.
For those who are not familiar with ECHO, it stands for Early Childhood Holistic Outcomes. Research started in 2014 in partnership with the consultants in KK Women's and Children Hospital and was funded by Lien Foundation. The ECHO framework was then developed and piloted by THK EPIC centers between 2014 to 2016, before the MSF adopted it and nationalized it in 2019. Marisa, shall we do a quick walk through the ECHO processes?
So SG Enable would usually refer a child to an EPIC center at which an intake assessment will be conducted to place him or her in the right programs and the right class profiles upon his enrollment to the EPIC center. Once enrolled, the EPIC team's assessment period takes up to 6 to 8 weeks, where the routine-based interviews will be conducted through the social worker's visit to the child's homes. During the EPIC sessions themselves, team members comprising of different therapists and class teachers would conduct school routine observations that generates behavior descriptors that would inform the team of the child's current abilities. With that, the first global child outcomes meeting will take place, bringing forth all the team members' observations and also parents' priorities of the child. In these meetings, the team will hold really extensive discussions to arrive at a functional age estimate for each of the 3 global child outcomes. Once ready, the team would then meet up with parents in a case conference where a two-way discussion would take place to inform all attendees of the child's abilities and which of the child's next milestones would be prioritized in the individualized education plan, along with planned supports and strategies. So these discussions are really a lively exchange of ideas and feedback with lots of brainstorming to ensure that both the child's home and school environment are ready to support the child appropriately. So IEPs usually spend over the period of a year of functional intervention. After the first 6 months, a review will take place to keep both the EIT members and the families in check of the child's progress. At the end of the next 6 months, another review and assessment process will take place to renew the IEP goals in the form of a pre-case once again. Following that, another case conference will be held. This continuous process will take place until the discharge of the child from EPIC services. So when the pandemic happened, many of the safety regulations had to be adhered to reduce the spread of the COVID outbreak in our communities. On top of the HBL and the hybrid arrangement, staff were not allowed to gather in the office anymore and were encouraged to work at home for non-client facing matters. Visitors, like our clients' parents, were not allowed into the EPIC centers. To rise above such challenges, the entire GCO meeting and case conference moved on to a virtual platform so that the assessments and discussions can proceed as per usual.
Oh, how else did the service delivery model differ during the pandemic?
So apart from moving team meetings and case conferences onto a virtual platform, there were three main adaptations to the way interventions and services were delivered. Siti, I'm sure that you would be able to further explain to our viewers here today how these interventions looked like on the ground.
These were the HBL packages provided by our OT team. Basically, it is made up of specific instructions for different activities such as sensory play, cross-motor play, and handwriting. For children who require PT services, they also had HBL packages made up of exercises, stretches, and strategies that the parents and the child can do at home. These HBL packages by the SLTs include home strategies for oral motor stimulation, language stimulation, as well as social communication strategies. The early interventionists also contributed to their HBL packages in activities like play and engagement, routine-based and naturalistic approaches.
These packages were indeed a very good resource for the families. I remembered how we would update the HBL resources every week to ensure that there would be a variety of strategies used to upkeep the continuity of the child's progress and also sufficient opportunities to help the children generalize their skills that were being targeted. How did you find the whole experience, Siti?
I love how we are able to use a lot of coaching skills in teletherapy to guide and empower the parents to carry out these strategies and intervention at home. It enabled us to tap on a different set of skills that my team and I required to have. I would like to show everyone a quick example of a teletherapy group session by our SD who was engaging the class in a reading session. In the video, you can see her trying to engage the child while reading by getting the child to do some actions.
The birds got dirty. They were not happy. We hate, said the birds. We can get clean like this. And look, they're using their feathers. They go splash, 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 splash. Can you guys join in? Let's try. Splash, 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 splash.
Wow, that video really gave the parents an insight into what a typical SD session may be like in the class. And it really showed parents how they too can practice the skills they learned from the video and apply them at home. It seemed like such an empowering experience for everyone involved. What was some of the feedback gathered from the parents who were involved in teletherapy?
I received feedback from parents of children with complex needs who fall on a GMSCS level 4 or 5. When carrying out the strategies, the parents found it tough because it required both parents to be facilitating and engaging the child. However, the parents felt that despite the fact that there was no face-to-face services during that time, they were still adequately supported. They also suggested that the child should be seen once a month to check on the child's progress, especially when the period of remote learning is prolonged.
Oh, so Siti, what were your takeaways then?
There are quite a number for me. Firstly, teletherapy is not one size fits all. It might work for some kids and it might not for others. There needs to be a comprehensive inclusion criteria to ensure that teletherapy session is effective. Secondly, teletherapy does not just comprise of sessions where the child looks at the screen and carry out the therapy session or the lesson on their own. It is important for the parent or the caregiver to be present to engage or facilitate the child. Therapy becomes very much like a coaching session for the parent who is the interventionist at the point of time, while the therapist provides direction. Even when the parents were working from home, we made it a necessity for at least one of them to be present. Thirdly, technological literacy was something I took for granted. I think the first few weeks we spent just to ensure that the parents know what applications to use or even to know where to position their tablet, their laptop or phone during session. We also had grandparents as the caregivers and who need more guidance for the technological logistics. Lastly, I feel we've become the masters of our home strategies. Before COVID, when we plan for sessions, we usually plan for two parts, the therapy itself and what should we teach caregivers for them to carry over in their home. However, through the pandemic, we realized that we've become more proficient with strategies for home, and that's because that has become our main plan now. It definitely made us better home strategies planners.
Wow, those are valuable lessons indeed. What are some of the practices that you think we can continue with moving forward?
Even as the pandemic becomes better managed, and as we resume our pre-pandemic services gradually, there are things that we can continue to keep. For professional development, we continued some of our trainings virtually, and what's great is that we could do follow-ups regularly with experts or coaching with our supervisors without them being present physically, making learning more convenient than ever before. For communication purposes, we continue to have virtual case conferences for parents who find it difficult to take time off work to be physically present in our centers. Because of the convenience, online communication were not just limited to standard case conferences, but were also extended to parents whenever there is a need for communication, allowing communication to be more efficient and effective. Likewise, we could easily communicate within the team virtually, which allowed the full team to be present even if they are serving in different centers. Our HBL packages have become a resource hub for our practitioners. We do still have access to these resources, and many of the home strategies can still be used in our current strategies or training material for our home embedded learning strategies, or what we call ELS, which is a part of ECHO framework. With the system already in place, it ensures that all our services can continue to be provided effectively when changes arise. For example, recently one of our centers went through a renovation, and as a result, the service delivery model had to undergo a major shift. The teachers and therapists were able to rely on these resources, but more amazingly, overall, our colleagues and I are better prepared now should changes arise. It tells us that even though the times when services may be disrupted, support and intervention of these children will still be able to continue.
Thank you, Siti and Marissa, for the insightful sharing. We will now open the floor for questions for the next 5 minutes. We have a question already. So this is a question from someone who asked, how does the Iaacd parents' well-being remotely?
Alright, so during the HBL season, right, the teachers were actually required to check in with the families about once a week. So these sessions were really helpful in informing our EI team on whether the family is well adjusted or if they require more support. So should they require more support, the teachers will actually relay the concerns on the whole team so that we will actually brainstorm alternatives together to find out how we can support the families better. So for example, we had a family who had 2 children with ASD under the age of 4 years old, and on top of that, mother was also caring for a newborn baby, and their father was an essential worker, so he was working out. So mother was really at home for long hours with the children, and then she was sharing that she's having difficulty trying to figure out how to engage her children and how to occupy them. She's spreading out ideas. Yeah, so we were really the support that we gave her is not only just giving her ideas and HBL packages, but we really, the teacher went back to the center to pack resources to really just mail it back to the family so that she would be able to have readily resources ready just to engage her children with. So she said that it was really helpful because then she felt that at least she knew what to do when the things were already there.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of effort.
Yeah, the teachers are really submitted them they had to go back to pack different individualized kits for each kid. So it was really lovely to see that teachers step up and rise up to the challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you so much, Marissa. Oh, we have another question from Hasina. What is the flow of processes for your teletherapy?
So we begin with choosing the kind of children that want to do teletherapy. So it's quite a strict inclusion criteria that
environment must be safe, the caregiver must be around, and then after that, it needs to be suitable time when the parent is free, the parent is also free. And then after that, we went through the consent and briefing, so there's informed consent first, and then we brief the parents on what they should expect in the teletherapy session. So for example, how they manage if the child is unwell, then we don't see the child, or if you're doing something and you need to move, you put the child away, and then after that you move your iPad, your phone. Yeah. And then after that, once the parent agree and they sign the informed consent, we get the parents to have a short prep session. So they need to know what's the flow of the session because they need to prep the items. So you don't put the child in front of your laptop and then after that you need to run, get a gym ball, for example. Yeah. So I think it's best that they know what are the things that they need or the equipment that they need to put around them so they can just get in between different strategies. Yeah. And then at the end of the session, the therapist needs to evaluate was effective and see what to improve, or if the child is suitable, or if the child is not suitable for teletherapy. So if the child is not suitable for teletherapy, then we need to consider other things like or maybe consider a home visit during the COVID time. Yeah, so that we know that the families are supported in terms of the therapy needs. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of prep work as well. It's not just a session going online, there's so much going on before the session even started. It's really from the team. Oh, thank you for getting the questions in from staff. Watin, within your current processes, you had a difference in your service delivery before and after COVID. How did the parents perceive this difference?
And take this question. Yeah, so definitely it was a really huge shift in our service delivery that the parents felt, because that would mean that like they themselves had to be the one to facilitate the intervention, whether it was in the form of the HBL packages or in the form of like teletherapy sessions. So it took some time for the parents to get used to conducting the strategies at home, but once they got accustomed to it, our team started to receive more feedback and things were more collaborative because then parents were telling us what was working, what was not. So it was really helpful in trying to come up with the best plan and the most effective plan for each family at home.
So it's very tailored, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so one last question. Okay, no. We're now, okay, sorry, we have come to the end of the panel discussion, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for the questions. Okay, we will now move on to the next segment of our session. So thank you everyone for your questions, they were really insightful, and thank you Siti and Marissa for sharing your experience with us today. We will now have the team from Rainbow Center to share their experiences with us. We have here with us today two senior occupational therapists, Jonathan and Vidya, who have been practicing for 11 and 6 years respectively. They will now be sharing with us on their journey of postural care and the innovative ways of using technology to enhance learning, parent coaching, and to improve service delivery.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the IAACD conference. Here in Singapore, my name is Jonathan, and I'm an occupational therapist from Rainbow Center. And together with me is my colleague Divya, who also is an occupational therapist.
Both Jonathan and I are part of the Allied Health Professionals team in Rainbow Center, specifically in the special education, also known as SPEC. In line with this year's theme on Build Back Better, we are honored to share with you on our journey of introducing and implementing postural care as part of service improvements and adaptations to school programming.
As part of our clinical service for postural management, the occupational therapists and physiotherapists here in Rainbow Center typically look at assessments and prescription of mobility devices, seating systems, and provide therapy to improve functional outcome. We took a paradigm shift from simply prescribing proper classroom seating to personalized seating systems and adopting a more holistic approach in viewing postural care in the child's 24-hour postural needs.
Therefore, today we're excited to discuss our hopes, experience, and innovations in the supported lying initiative against the backdrop of challenges and opportunities from the COVID-19 period.
Before we dive into supported lying, which is one aspect of postural care, we will first share about postural management. Postural management is a combination of different types of postural care: classroom seating, standing, walking, hoist and transfers, specialist sitting and positioning, physiotherapy, surgery, and orthosis. A child and young person's postural management plan depends on their specific postural care needs.
Yes, Jonathan. And so postural care is any intervention that protects a person's body shape in lying, sitting, standing, and supported comfort that helps to manage muscle tone and protects the abdominal capacity to ensure health and well-being. Postural care is the term used to describe the physical management of a child who has a physical disability and limited independent movement. Now, some of you might be wondering, why is postural care so important?
And that's a good question. People who find it difficult to move are at most risk of body shape changes. It is because they sit and lie in limited posture and lack the ability to move freely. It is important that we look at their posture and body shape and ensure it remains symmetrical, or in case of certain deformity, to keep the body in the most optimal shape. Poor posture often results in body shape deformities from muscle and joint contractures, pain from tone spasm and pressure injuries, and disruption of sleep for both the child and the caregiver.
On the flip side, good outcomes of postural care increases mobility and participation, improves respiratory, digestive, and circulatory functions, and results in better sleep quality. All of these increases cognition and improves emotional regulation.
Very well said, Divya. Just as how we were taught and practiced in explaining the definition and benefits of postural care consistently and confidently, we want to keep in mind that effective postural care supports function, reduces effort, and protects body shape and structure. The analogy of the human sandwich helps parents and caregivers understand the forces of gravity is always at work, pushing downwards on the child while the force of the surface pushes upwards to sandwich the child between these forces.
And in the case of our students 2 years ago, most classes were only equipped with thin gym or yoga mats in the classroom for students to lie down during their movement break. It was quite heart-wrenching to see and feel our students positioned in unsupported ways. For most students with limited mobility, it was as if they were balancing and lying uncomfortably on a flat surface.
So with greater awareness and understanding, rather than allowing gravity to worsen body rotations, deviations, and asymmetries, we sought to harness the force of gravity to gently promote aligned body postures over time.
Yes, that's right. And we can't stress enough how important this is. Thus, keeping this in mind, in Rainbow Centre, we have classified our postural care services into the following: seating, standing, mobility, and supported lying. We are also using the Gross Motor Classification and Functioning Scale, GMFCS, to identify and prioritize the students who may require these services.
We started out by asking ourselves how many students require supported lying intervention on top of existing postural management services we provide. Through the guidance of our OT consultant, Ms. Sarah Hill, we were able to scope the size of the need by consolidating and representing data of students' GMFCS status in each cohort, program, and school level for service planning.
And in that analysis of data, we found that approximately 30% of students in Rainbow Centre have a GMFCS status, and about 45% of these students are at higher risk of poor posture due to their GMFCS 4 and 5 statuses. Therefore, the occupational therapy and physiotherapy departments came together to strategize and prioritize the provision of supported lying intervention to address our students' postural needs.
For today, we will be sharing more on our journey in supported lying and how this service has evolved as we adapt to the impacts of COVID-19. In 2020, RC embarked on a supported lying training with a 4-part workshop series. Although workshops should be hands-on in nature, the pause button of COVID did not hinder our efforts to equip our OTs and PTs with the knowledge and skill for supported lying. This virtual space of video conferencing broadened our professional learning to include therapists across campus, units in Rainbow Centre, and even across continents with our trainer. This is a familiar repertoire as we speak on this platform of the 3rd edition of IAACD.
Following in 2021, the OTs and PTs focused on piloting the supported lying assessment with selected students that we worked with the intentional development of skills, competencies, and confidence to engage in supported lying.
Indeed, the hybrid form of delivering clinical instruction and practice was very well received and catered to our clinicians' development needs.
So what is supported lying? Supported lying is one aspect of postural care. With limited mobility, change position, and have a break from their seating systems, it is important to ensure that they are supported in the lying position for comfort and protection of their body shape. As this is a relatively new practice in Rainbow Centre, we begin with daytime positioning and looked at protecting the body shapes of our students in school as part of their movement break.
The supported lying process has 8 important steps. It starts with a checklist to identify the need for supported lying, and it begins conversations about body shape. We then move on to interviewing parents and caregivers to find out about their 24-hour routine and understand more about different postures they might be in throughout the day, while understanding their safety needs.
After information is gathered, we then conduct a physical assessment to observe, measure, and document the student's body symmetry. With this information, we then begin to co-produce a supported lying plan with our student and everyone that is involved in his or her care. This leads to the development of a supported lying plan with personalized photos and sequence, pace, and safety needs. The process also includes education and coaching of others to carry out the student's supported lying plan.
Lastly, ongoing support is provided and supported lying plan is reviewed. As our therapists develop knowledge in this area, we are keenly aware of parents and caregivers' role in posture management, in which their involvement is intentional in the start, middle, and end of the process. So Divya, who else is involved in supported lying for it to be effective?
And that's an important question, Jonathan. While we recognize that parents are central to the development and implementation of supported lying plans, we must not forget other stakeholders in the spiderweb of relationships that we see here. After mapping out the involvement of various stakeholders surrounding the student, we were mindful of the perceived importance of the intervention and sphere of its influence in its implementation.
Without going in depth into our stakeholder analysis, we hope that our experience would support you in your own postural care journey with your child and young person, remembering that he or she is at the center of the conversation and connection to their community.
Yes, that's right. And you might be wondering, what was the impact of COVID-19 on our practices? As Jonathan mentioned earlier, the training for supported lying for our therapists was first piloted as an on-site training with our OT consultant. When COVID hit, we had to adapt to these changes quickly. With our trainer returning overseas, subsequent trainings were conducted virtually. This in fact allowed for more reflective practice workshops and deeper learning by doing through the coaching sessions done in pairs. As a result, this methodology of training embedded more rehearsal and instilled greater confidence for our young practitioners.
This also paved the way for how we implement certain steps in part of our 8-step supported lying process. Most of the 8 steps were initially done in person. For example, steps 2's inquiry-based information gathering, which involves the interviewing of the student's primary caregiver, was initially done in person, where the parents would have to come down to school and be interviewed by the therapist. However, with safe management measures in place, we had to find alternative ways to meet parents and conduct the information gathering. With increasing use of virtual platforms to have meetings, we were able to connect with parents and caregivers through the use of technology, such as WhatsApp video calls, Zoom, or Google Meet platforms. This allows parents to be more involved in the inquiry-based information gathering, as they were able to meet with therapists at a more convenient time that did not require them to make additional work or caregiving arrangements. They were also able to share photos and videos of their child's current sleeping postures in their home environment through these virtual platforms. Overall, the efficacy of information sharing and understanding increased as we incorporated visual summaries by the use of PowerPoint presentation and photographic documentation.
Yes, that's right. Typically, most of the supported lying review sessions are also done in school, and this involves reviewing the plans that have been developed to see if they're still able to meet the needs of the students. I had one student who was unable to attend school due to his medical condition that made him more vulnerable and susceptible to possible complications from the COVID-19 virus. The student prior to this had already had a supported lying plan developed by his OTs in the previous year. That being said, it was important that we reviewed his supported lying plan, especially since he was spending most of his time at home. We connected with his mother through Zoom and had decided to do a live demo session to guide his mother on how to position his support based on his supported lying plan. It was definitely an interesting experience coaching a parent virtually. We had set up a lab and used one of us to lie down so that we could show our students' parents exactly where the support would go. What struck me from this experience was the possibilities of telepractice as an alternative mode of service delivery when looking at postural care for this group of students.
In summary, we found growth during this time of the pandemic in areas of continual professional development, program innovation, and new strategies in telepractice.
Thank you for being captivating listeners, and we will now start the time of sharing for any questions to clarify, encouragements to give, or validation for the common experience to build back better.
Jonathan and Divya for the valuable presentation. We will now open the floor for questions for the next 5 minutes. And do not worry, just keep the questions coming, as even if we run out of time, the team will continue to answer your questions on the chat room and even contact you if necessary. Okay, we have a question. How did parents perceive supported lying or follow-up?
Okay, now I should take it. So yes, I think maybe just to give some context as well about the parents involved in making the supported lying. This was initially done as a pilot for in school for just daytime positioning. But of course, that being said, the parents involved that too, which required us to have conversation with parents and find out about their 24-hour positioning and how what are the types of postures that they spend most of their time in. That was where parents really came in. And I think parents, in my experience, parents were obviously asking, when do we then do this at home? Can we do this for nighttime? What are some of the equipments that we can buy? Yeah, so they were generally quite interested, and I think they could also supported lying.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like they were really on board and very excited about this entire venture. Wow, that's really nice. What are some challenges in implementing this?
Yeah, I will take that question. Implementation is a science on its own, and I think as clinicians, we often grow as we learn how to deliver service and implement it effectively. The operational aspect would definitely be getting the buy-in at many different levels, and we are quite blessed in Rainbow Centre to have the support of our senior management when it's aligned to what teaching teams and allied professional teams have to achieve by the end of the year. There's this common language that we all want to achieve, having an adequate postural care plan for every child, because it's a right, not just a want. We often face issues of space constraints in the classroom. That's because in a class of about 8 to 11 students with multiple disabilities, to get them all to be lying down on the floor with their wheelchairs and supportive equipment is probably not possible. So a final class choreography of how each student can have their 1 to 1.5 hours supported lying in the class has to be choreographed with the class activities. We often also see that because equipments have to be shared with students in the senior program closer to 18, with also PM sessions that cater to students at 7 years old. We have to cater a large range of equipment of seating and lying, and hence with better equipment or inventorizing of the classroom, we are able to manage space a little better. Of course, lastly, it's really getting the equipment. So the equipment that we have right now is directly shipped from the UK. And I think as more and more parents are starting to see the need of how people sit will determine how people lie will determine how they sit, to how they stand and walk. Hopefully market forces and also more local distributors being able to give the parents a choice, a supported lying solution that is most feasible and easiest. And just to add on to what Vivian had said about parents' involvement, when parents are actually in the crucial part of co-producing the plan, we start to see how this implementation process can be eased, because parents will tell you that this is a favorite soft toy, this is a favorite pillow with a certain aroma that has to be with the child as they lie. And it really sets the dimension and really puts the child in the right position for better engagement in the supine posture. And I think getting them supported is just first half the question to solve. It's really how they are engaged and participating, which is what we are more concerned about.
Wow, so I hear there's so many moving parts to even get the plan off for each individual child. There's so many children who need this. That's really a huge undertaking, and I'm so excited to hear how you are taking steps to move it forward. Wow. Okay, we have another question. We have quite a few questions. Let's look at the one from Henlin. Was a lack of specialized equipment a limitation for implementing supported lying or seating systems at home and in school?
I guess that's what Jonathan just mentioned, at the beginning of this journey, when we had not procured some of these supported lying equipment, definitely was a challenge, because we needed quite a lot of additional pillows, for example, and support. And at that time, we relied on caregivers to then provide these supports and bring them to school. But at this point of time, we are quite lucky in the sense that we have procured individual base kits for each student. And when it comes to seating systems, for example, that is still ongoing for us, where we continuously assess and prescribe seating systems. So the school has our own inventory of different types of seating systems. But part of the prescription process also then involves parents' support to then also purchase some of these seating systems for the students. Yeah, so just keeping in mind that our students do go back home and spend most of their time at home as well, and it's important that they are then supported at home.
Yeah, really add on, I think I have to give notable mention to the current funding available through the Assistive Technology Fund, and that really provides $40,000 for each child per lifetime. And of course, particular to the COVID effort, the government has actually provided us with the COVID relief fund to allow us to really innovate. In particular, for our supported lying intervention, we found that with this fresh funds, we are able to kickstart this process and to really get 30 base kits across 2 campuses, so that at least school can be the one driving the push for equipment provision. Yeah.
Wow, that's really a lot that's going on, and you need both the parents and funding and so many things that you're doing. Amazing. Okay, from Jenny Carroll, can you tell us what positioning you use for the child to carry out function, tasks, and to play, please?
Yeah, so I think we just want to go back to then, again, talk about postural care, and the emphasis of it being then, a combination of different types of intervention. So then when it comes to functional tasks, then we again think about, what is the task and how is this child positioned? So then could the child be doing this particular task in seating? Then of course we would then look at the seating system. And with supported lying, then we also then encourage teachers in schools to then also conduct some of their lessons as well while they are engaged in that supported lying.
Okay, so it's all about functionality in that sense. Wow, okay. From Wei Guarong, how would you carry out the physical education class for the physical disabilities such as wheelchair users? Wow, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, this is really a careful formulation of the class lesson plans between the physical development teacher and also our on-site physiotherapist. So in the SPED sector, we do have a concept of integrative sessions where we really feel that intervention can go much further when the physiotherapist works with the teachers on the teaching plan, and to really incorporate movement with learning, especially for those who need to be positioned in a supine or better supported seating system in maybe the playground or the garden to conduct such activities of learning. So I guess in school, we really want to achieve what MOE, our Ministry of Education, hopes that all SPED students achieve, which is learning, living, and really working. And so that's what we're really all working towards as we conduct such integrative sessions.
That's really lovely to know, especially since you mentioned this is a right for every child and not just the one. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. I'm afraid we have come to the end of our panel discussion, but no worries, please keep the questions coming and our team will address them either in the chat or separately, privately through email. So thank you everyone for your lively participation and thank you Jonathan and Divya for sharing your knowledge with us today. As the hour draws to a close, I would once again like to thank our panelists, Titi, Marissa, Jonathan, and Divya for making the time to speak to us and on the adaptation of practices in school-based settings. I believe this was a fruitful session for all of us. I, for one, have learned so much from the teams from PhD EIC and RC. If you would like to find out more from the respective teams, please do contact them at their respective email addresses as seen on the slide. Thank you each and every one of you for sharing the past hour with us. This is IAACD's World CP Day 24-hour global listening